Hey guys, so today we got our Vessi seeds order and I thought I'd do this video, just kind of go through everything we picked up. I'll give you a little bit of a tour of my planning, brainstorming area. So we have a little coffee table desk, small TV screen for watching movies on bed, weather days, tractor collection, horse collection, jackknife collection, more collections of miscellaneous keepsakes from, actually the big truck was my grandfather's and the two die-cast tractors, that one there I bought after my grandfather passed, and this is one that he bought and I got after he passed away. And then I have my faithful farm dog and a pet rabbit, which is actually, she's over there hiding behind the wood pile in our cozy. So we also have a small library of gardening books. First one I picked up years ago was the Backyard Homestead. Picked it up, I was working at a Suregain feed store at the time, and looked through it. Had me captivated right off the top. Bought it. I've done a lot of the things out of it. Worked a lot of those different theories and stuff in my early start out. But then I've advanced on. I've got the Vegetable Gardener's Bible, Polyface Design. This is our little library started here. Hoping to add more to that as the years go on. So we'll start to go through the seed order. So this year we're going to try some new stuff. We're going to try parsnip this year for the first time. Hopefully we can get that to grow here. It'll be the first time we've tried it. I'm sure it'll handle a cold climate just fine. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully we can get a decent enough seed bed for it, enough soil depth that they'll actually grow to a reasonable length. We're also going to try turnip this year. First time trying turnip. Never had the acreage to do it before, but this year with the extra space, we're really hoping to try and amplify the garden as much as we can. So we've got, we've also got carrots. We do 3 different types of carrots. Neptune is a longer, more like your grocery store style carrot. And then we also do a shorter style carrot that doesn't tend to grow as long, but they're a lot sweeter, a little more flavorful. And then we also do purple carrots. They are awesome flavor, give a really cool color to any dishes that you're using them in. And then so we do Swiss chard, and a fair amount of it. We eat quite a bit of it. So we have 2 different types. We use just a regular, it's got a light silver stalk, big green leaf, and then we also use Kaleidoscope, which is a mix of different colored stalks all in one package, and it's actually really kind of nice for color. It looks good and flavor's awesome. So we're trying out a lettuce seed pack this year. Vessi sells packs. You can get their multiple different types of seeds, usually three different types of seeds, sometimes 4. If you buy the pack, it comes with all of them. So we are trying one of their seed packs this year, and so these are the seeds that all come with that pack. So we're going to give those a shot. There's a lot of seeds in this one here, so we shouldn't have any shortage of lettuce this year. So that'll be a good deal. And then in the squash department, we kind of go a little bit overboard with the squash because we've got a large compost pile that we grow the stuff right in the compost pile. We also run our meat chickens on the compost pile right next to it, and as the plants die and the fruit tends to go bad, we just huck it over the fence into the chickens. So we do a summer squash, zucchini, we do butternut squash, and we do 2 different types of buttercup squash. So these are like your more style squash, like that. And they all tend to keep fairly well. In the basement, we get months out of them. So we're doing pumpkins this year. We do try to do pumpkins every year. Last year was a little bit of an off year. We didn't have quite the success we had hoped for. So we're doubling down this year with 2 different types of jack-o'-lantern pumpkins, and we're also doing the Atlantic Giant pumpkins, and these things get massive. Last year we had one, it was just small, like that big, and it was fairly stout, fairly dense. We were late getting them in last year, and they didn't really perform the way we'd hoped, so we're hoping to be a little more on top of things this year. And we also do sunflowers just to keep the birds and the bugs and everything happy, and they look good in the garden too. So we like to add some color to attract pollinators to the garden. If you're looking to grow cucumbers, if you like to do pickles, if you like to make pickles, or you just like cucumbers in general, I recommend Marketmore 76. These seeds are amazing. My dad had bought live plants one year and they didn't perform, and I had planted these under the live plants, which were about 2 inches tall. I planted these under the live plants in just big clumps, and they grew phenomenally. I was picking 3 milk crates of cucumbers every week, and that was picking them pretty extensively, and they produced like that for probably 3 weeks. And we had also been eating out of them slowly as the early maturers came in, and I eat cucumbers a lot, and that year I was happy to see the end of them. But if you are looking for a lot of cucumbers, definitely go with those ones. They're a very good performer. And then we also do vegetable spaghetti or spaghetti squash. So we're gonna try out a corn pack this year. Normally I just buy large bags of corn seed, regular corn seed. Usually it's a peaches and cream style corn. But this year we're gonna go with a seed pack from Bessie's. It comes with 3 different types. Peaches and cream, all peaches and cream style corn. Just slightly different variances in the color and sweetness and size of ear. So the pack comes with 3 different types of seed. So we're hoping we can get them in the ground this year, and hoping I can have my seeder a little bit better calibrated. It's not a new seeder by any stretch. It's far older than I am. So it's taken some getting used to and trying to figure out the settings in it. And the seed's changed. Seed has changed so much since this seeder that I've got was in mass production or being used regularly. So trying to get that setting just right is kind of a little bit funny. And last year we used it for the corn, and it overplanted, and the corn was like a half an inch apart per stalk, like way too close, and they didn't perform as well as I'd hoped. Had beautiful stalks, but we didn't get any yield off of it. And so we do beans too. We're gonna try doing baking beans this year. Normally we just do like a yellow bush bean and a green bush bean. I find Vessie's Gold Rush yellow bean is a very good producer. I've used it in poor soil, next to no soil, and I've had very good yields out of it, more so than I can keep up with most times, and I usually end up giving it away because I can't process it and preserve it fast enough. So those are a good producer. And they also have a green bean. It's called Provider. And you guys can find all this stuff on Vessie's website or through their catalog. But the Provider green bean is also very good. Same deal. We normally end up giving it away before we end up using it because it produces so heavily. So this year we're going to do the baked beans as well. We're going to do dried Jacob's Cattle baking beans. Something we can dry and put away to have for winter, for making chilies and baked beans and so on. That's going to be a new one for us this year, so hang tight on that one. We're going to try and follow some of these new seeds and really show how they're producing. You also notice I use a lot of inoculated seed. You don't have to. I personally like it. It gives them that extra little bit of boost to get them going. A lot of these seeds I'm going to germinate half of them in the house with a plate and some moist paper towel. And then we have ornamental corn as well. We're going to try that for the first time this year. So yeah, this will be our first year with the ornamental corn. See how that goes. It's more or less just going to be for a decoration thing. as my wife does photography, so we plant the sunflowers, the ornamental corn, and we also get, we usually get a couple different packs of just annual bird butterfly mix. This is just a surprise mix, so we'll see what comes out of that. But the bird and butterfly mix we use to put that in just to help attract butterflies and bees and pollinators and all that kind of thing. We have a Haskap berry orchard just up the road, not very far, a couple 100 yards, and they have pollinating bees. So I'm sure they venture their way down here. Positive they venture their way down here, which is fine by me. We actually get the extra pollination out of it, and they end up getting some extra honey for it, so it works out well that way. We do kale every year. We do just a little bit, just for our own use. But everybody in the area is getting on the health train with the local world situation, trying to eat healthier and so on. And with the extra nutritional value of kale and all that stuff, we kind of decided this year to double down, and we went with a larger pack of seed. And this is actually get 25 gram seed in the pack, so we're hoping that this produces really well. Hoping to try and have some of this for sale as well as for eating. We'll keep you posted on this because this is a different type of kale than what I've normally grown. So I'm hoping this will produce a little bit better and have a bigger plant. So I made a mistake in placing my order this year, and I ordered a Super Sugar Snap Pea collection, which I thought was going to be a couple different types. It ended up all being the exact same type, but 4 of these 125 gram packs of seed. So this year, I'm going to really be able to do some succession planting and see just how long I can get these to grow in the climate. I was unable to get treated seed for these, so these will be germinated inside for sure before I put them in the ground. And so I'm sure I've got enough seed here with these 4 packs to do me for the next couple of growing seasons. I'll probably use a pack, maybe 2 this year, and I'll just put the other 2 aside for next year, and then we'll be all set. Be a little bit less I gotta order. My mistake. So anyway, hopefully it'll pan out. We don't lose too much product out of it. And then we're also doing beets, as we always do beets. Hoping to have a little bit better setup this year, as we have a couple sandy spots now. Just with the opening of the new ground on this side of the property, we found a vein of sand, so I'm hoping that I can get some of that sand, mix it with some of my compost, make a really rich, sandy, loose soil that I can plant my carrots, turnips, parsnip, and the beets in. So not only am I going to get a decent beet green top, but I should be able to get a decent root underneath as well, that we can preserve, sell a few, pickle, can a few, and I love beets anyway, so hopefully we'll be able to get a little bit of a feed out of them this year. I think last year they were just in not the right spot, and the ground was getting a little bit tired. I think I got 5 beets that were actually we were able to cook and do something with, so I'm hoping for a better yield this year. Last year our garden ground was getting very tired, starting to get kind of run down, wore out. We hadn't added a whole lot to it in a couple of years. I try not to use a whole lot of pelletized fertilizer or commercial chemical fertilizer where I've got livestock. I try to make my own compost, my own fertilizer. And this year, just with some different expansions to the barnyard and some moving of fences and having the chickens turning the compost pile, I found a better way to get into the pile with the tractor as opposed to having to try and shovel it or wheel it to the tractor and then lug it from the barnyard to the gardens. Unfortunately, I didn't have any say in the design of how the yard was laid out. We're kind of limited as to how far we could move things, and the gardens were in before the livestock came. So it was kind of a bad design. Otherwise, everything would be very close and we could just wheel everything or not need the tractor. Ideally, that's how we would do it, but I've got a tractor now and my dad's got a tractor. His is 4-wheel drive, so the old way into the compost pile. We would use his machine for. Mine, unfortunately, is only 2-wheel drive and ground soft, and then I just end up stuck. So I was able to find a way in with my machine this year, and I put a good 8 to 12 inches of compost over the whole garden, the old existing garden at my parents' place, and I've got a couple ton of it over here at my place for our gardens this year that I'm planning to mix in. And the ground over here won't be as exhausted and tired as it'll be virgin ground. This will be the first year to be planted, so we're going to be up against the rocks a little bit in the hard terrain, but there's a good water source underground right there. It seems to stay pretty wet and moist all year, and I'm hoping with the mix of a little bit of sand into it from the sand vein here beside the house, and the mix of the compost in it as well, hopefully we should be able to put a pretty decent seed bed together and really be able to make some stuff grow, and not having everything as compacted and in such a tight space over at the other garden, being able to move things around and space things out a little bit more and give room for the plants to do their thing without trying to get as much out of a small piece of ground as we could by overplanting, which is a design flaw of my own. I kind of plant guy right out at being a horticulturalist and plant more than I need or more than I should, and the plants just suck the ground dry. So hopefully this year, with the extra nutritional value, the extra water holding capability with the compost in it, and we're going to change up our directions of our rows and beds this year. Normally we run them up and down the hill so they drain reasonably well and they're holding a whole lot of water, but I think with the last few years where we haven't had any rain, it's been very dry growing season, we're going to try and run our beds and our rows on a 45, and then in the top corners we'll put beds with some squash or something like that growing in it, and then that'll allow the water to still drain away if we do get a heavy rain season, but it'll also help kind of retain some of the water and keep it from just evacuating the garden as fast as it hits the ground. And it'll also help with holding the water for our irrigation if we do have to haul water in and run an irrigation system. The only thing that we won't be changing will be our berry patches. They'll continue to stay as they are. Hoping to work the ground closer to them a little bit more and expand on them, put in a few more high bush raspberries, blueberries, and probably I'll probably put in another 50 or so strawberry plants. If you noticed here, like I said earlier in the video, we don't get tomato seed. I still have tomato seed left over from last year. I did buy some. They germinated well, but they were just slow to really take off once they got outside, and they did eventually produce, but I would have liked to see a better yield out of them. So we buy live plants. I buy cherry tomatoes, I buy beefsteaks, and I buy jalapeno peppers and all the different colored bell peppers, red, green, orange, and yellow. I'm hoping this year to have my high tunnel up, and hopefully I'll be able to get a better yield out of them. Unless I was to plant them and black mulch them to add extra heat to the soil to help keep the weeds down and to draw the sun to the plant, because they're a plant that likes warm, hot climate. That's why they do best in a hothouse, or in a hotter growing climate than we are here. I'm hoping that this year I can have the high tunnel up so I don't have to deal with the mulch. I don't have to deal with putting in plants and not getting any yield. I did get a few jalapenos last year, but my bell peppers didn't perform the way I'd hoped. I'm also going to try and incorporate some of those plants into our flower beds and aesthetic gardens around the house. I'm also going to try and incorporate some of the lettuces and kales and all that kind of stuff in there, and we'll show you guys how, if you don't have big acreage and you don't have room for big gardens, you can grow this stuff just in your flower beds in front of your house if you have them, or in containers or anything like that. Closer to spring, we're going to buy potato seed. I'm going to plant potatoes in the ground, and I'm also going to try and do some in large black buckets and see how they produce in there, as opposed to in the ground. We've always planted them in the ground here, but I'd like to try and showcase and kind of put some stuff out there for those of you who don't have the room to have big gardens. You don't need big acreage, you don't need big space. The first year I planted a garden on my own, I did it all in bed boxes that I'd made out of old slab wood that I got from a gentleman up the road who has a sawmill. I just went up and got his waste slab wood. They were about 8 to 10 inches deep. I got my hands on some bagged soil. If I had access to actual topsoil without buying bagged, I would have done that. Some of the stuff I was able to do with topsoil that was on the property, but the area where our garden is now at my parents' place was virgin ground. We had clear cut it that spring as the ground thawed. Didn't get a chance to get it stumped. I had one little small patch that was old vegetable garden that just needed to be turned under again as it had sodded over essentially. So we turned that under. I used that for my root crops, and I planted everything else in an 8-inch deep bed box on top of forest floor, and they produced as much per square footage as I'm getting now planting directly in the ground. So I'm hoping to do some of that here at my new place. I'm hoping to do a lot of our regular stuff at the other garden. So I'm hoping I can take you guys through large garden in the ground, if you have the space for it, type of vegetable production. I'm hoping to do some bed boxes, some hugelkultur stuff. If you have small acreage, small area, small space, not a lot of room. If you don't have decent soil that you can dig deep into, I'm hoping to do bed boxes, raised beds, that kind of thing to help those of you in that situation. And I'm also hoping to do some in containers and in our own flower gardens just to help really show everybody that they don't need big acreage. They don't need to have great big deep soil beds. You can do this on your patio. It's up to you how much you actually want to do, how much you want to have room for. You can plant multiple plants in the same bucket, in the same little bed, and you can actually make it look really aesthetically pleasing. We're also going to run our chickens, our layers in and around throughout the vegetable garden with our electric nets to try and make seed bed prep gardens, cut down on our pests, cut down on weeds. And we're also going to run our meat birds on the compost pile again this year, as we're starting to build the compost pile already with the waste, manure and bedding from the horse barn and so on. We're hoping to run the chickens on that again this year, let them dig through it, tear out the bugs, tear out the weeds, and really make nice compost again for us next year, so we can keep this rolling and add more compost to the growing ground around both here and at the other house. This year I invested in a compost thermometer through Vessies as well with my seed order, so I can make sure my compost is getting hot enough to actually break down the material in it and to kill any bacteria, any unbeneficial microorganisms in there. Hopefully we can get it up to the right temperature long enough and really produce some decent compost this year. I'm pretty happy with how everything turned out last year without having the thermometer, just by analyzing the topsoil and the compost that come off of the backside of the pasture. It looked phenomenal. I can't see any reason why it wouldn't grow. I think the only thing we may run into is we may get a bit of extra weeds from it, just where it is horse manure compost. Horse manure tends to carry a little bit more seed through it, as they don't regurgitate and double digest their food like a cow or a goat would regurgitate and chew its cud. Horses don't do that. They just eat, and it goes right out the backside. Anything that doesn't get broken down in the stomach just passes through. I've had piles of manure in my pasture that have grown oats just from the horses not completely processing their feed and just woofing it down, and it just tends to pass through. The seed coat doesn't break down fast enough in the stomach, and it just grows anyway. And there's obviously the hay dust and hay seed and chaff that the chaff and the hay seed and dust from in the barn and the leftover hay in the stalls that's going to germinate and take seed in the pasture as well. And if that didn't get enough temperature in the compost to kill those seeds, and the chickens didn't turn them up and tear them out and eliminate them, eat the seeds, eat the weeds, eat the grass, eat the shoots, and even the waste foregrain feed that we feed, if any of that stuff didn't get eaten and it stayed in the compost and it didn't break down, we're going to have that grow in the garden guaranteed. But the only upside to that is when we do weed the garden, we take all the weeds out, we feed them to the chickens, so they end up eating it anyway. And I'm hoping maybe this year, if I can be set up in time, we're also going to run turkeys and pigs. Hopefully. If we can, great. If not, well, there's always next year. So stay tuned. We're also going to do another video on our chicken coop. If you guys remember, we had a video posted earlier about our eggs freezing, so we're hoping that we can do a video on that to kind of show you guys how that came about, how it turned out. We haven't had any issues with eggs freezing. I think we lost one more after that, but it was a really cold night and the door of the coop got left open a little bit longer, and everybody's up laying. All of our commercial layers are laying. We're getting 6 eggs a day. Our Easter egg or Wyandotte crosses haven't started laying yet, but they tend to be on the longer scale before they start laying in age. Unfortunately, this weekend past we had to cull one of our roosters. I was hoping I could keep both of them because we're going to get more hens in the spring, so it would have been nice to have 2 roosters to fertilize eggs and we could hatch our own, but unfortunately one of our roosters was just a bit too aggressive with the hens. I was going in and finding the hens injured and wounded, finding blood on their heads and their necks, and the feeder from their combs being tore and ripped up in the breeding process, and witnessed him being aggressive with the hens. He had tried to be aggressive with me and with my wife, and the only thing that he wasn't aggressive with was our dog. I tried to use her to try to settle his attitude down. I tried multiple things to settle him down, to try and see if I could bring him down a peg on his role as the boss, and nothing seemed to work. He just didn't seem to want to settle out and be a nice, respectable rooster. So unfortunately, as pretty as he was, we had to cull him. But we have 2, so we had to cull Tiny. Tony is still hanging out, doing his thing. He's stepped into the role as head honcho. He's protecting the hens well. He's fertilizing, breeding the hens, and he's not aggressive with us. He'll actually allow you to handle him and pat him. He'll peck you once in a while, but he doesn't try to straight out attack you. When I'd open the coop in the morning, our other rooster would jump down and try to attack my head as I was reaching in to collect eggs, and I couldn't have him for that reason, because if there was a day I couldn't get there and I had to have somebody else do it, I couldn't risk somebody else getting hurt because of an aggressive rooster. So unfortunately, that's just the downsides of farming and keeping livestock, but the upside will be in the spring when we can maybe throw some of our own eggs through an incubator or have a hen go broody and hatch out our own chicks. So there's upsides and downsides to this, folks, and there's more good days to doing this kind of thing than there are bad. So if you're having a bad day, things aren't going right, just hang in there. It gets better. Experience can't be found on Google. It can't be bought. You have to actually put the boots to the ground. It will get better. Trust me. We'll talk to you later.